Hey everybody, welcome to Tech for Psych, where we combine the latest in neurotechnology with ancient wisdom to supercharge your brain. I'm Dr. Cody Rawl, your medical doctor confidant. Today we're sitting down with one of the co-founders of the Muse Headband, Chris Aimone. Chris took us through the history of Muse and how they've gotten to this point with the Muse 2 and Muse S and the beautiful app that they have and the experiences that they have for meditators. We talked about material science, we talked about big data, machine learning, we talked about bringing new experiences on their app, we talked about the future of Muse in which we can use big data in order to deliver more amazing, intense, and more involved meditative sessions for people that are using the Muse Headband. I hope you enjoyed the interview. Hey, it's Dr. Cody Rawl with Tech for Psych. I've got the co-founder and chief technological officer of Muse, Chris Aimone, with me. Thanks so much for joining us, Chris. Really appreciate it.
Awesome, man. Excited for our conversation.
Yeah, it's such an exciting time for you guys with the new release of Muse S, and I know you guys have a lot of other projects going on. So I've heard quite a bit of your background on talks that you've done before, but for our audience, I'd really appreciate it if you talked about some of your background in computer science and how you came into being a part of founding and then being part of Muse all this time.
Yeah. It's a pretty interesting story when I think about it. At the time, it's just moving from one moment to the next, and you really have, no idea where you're going to end up. But I think, when I look back at sort of my earlier academic days, I had a pretty strong belief that, as human beings, we should be melding with technology in some way. I sort of was in touch with what I felt were limitations of being human. And I was pretty interested in being able to move beyond these things. And so I thought that I could do that through computer technology, specifically wearable tech. So I worked a lot with a guy named Steve Mann. He's a professor at University of Toronto. And a lot of people, would call him the sort of father of wearable computing because he was doing some really, really interesting work quite a long time ago where he would sort of intervene in his, visual sense reality. And, he sort of came up with this term of mediated reality, which is kind of like if you looked at augmented reality and virtual reality and diminished reality and you kind of roll them all together, that was sort of this general concept of with a computer intervening with your senses. And so I was really fascinated by this concept because, sensory ability is, kind of, front and center, for our consciousness. This is how we gather data about the world. This is how we, figure out if we're understanding things correctly or not. So all new information comes through our senses. And so I was really fascinated by the opportunity to extend our sensory capability. And so so that was a piece of it. Mm-hmm. And, I literally spent, months of my life, while I was in grad school, walking around with a computer on my head. I did become a cyborg, and I think what was kind of, very interesting for me is the kind of ultimate recognition that, going so deep with technology had its consequences. And in many ways, the things that I was looking for, I ended up distancing myself from, so to some extent, I was interested in participating in the world and socially with other humans. And, given my, ecology, there were things in that I found challenging. So I sort of felt like, if I could sort of do these things with the computer, like remember people's names, or, sort of, have a deeper understanding of what's happening, maybe I can, find it easier to engage with my fellow humans. Unsurprisingly, the opposite was true. You walk around with a computer on your head, then like people just think you're a super weirdo. And so there was that dimension of the experience, but there was another part of it as well. And that was, seeing the impact to my consciousness of, intervening with my senses in various ways. I felt the impact of having a computer system try to give me relevant information, while I was walking about the world, and this is, a taste of what we're experiencing now, being distracted all of the time by the tech that we carry around with us. So it was fascinating that I went through this journey and ultimately, felt a necessity to step away from technology and try to get back to basics and understanding what it was like to simply be human and, how we could work on, the skills that we're born with, but we still need to develop and maintain in our lives. And so this was kind of around the time that I founded Interaxon with a group of friends. And, the work that we, do here, and the kind of the genesis of the company really was based around a recognition that through a technological means, we could help to get back in touch with some very core and basic human attributes and capabilities. And so I can go into that story, but I think for me, one of the the most interesting things is going through this like grand adventure with wearable tech, ultimately to want to reject it because it kind of misserved the end goal of actually being like a happy and more capable human. And so in some ways, Muse, is trying to be an antidote to that in some way. And it's funny because it is a piece of tech, but, it's a piece of tech that really encourages someone to dive within and to start to recognize the impact that our environment and our, natural inclinations as animals, how those can lead us astray and actually leverage technology against us, in various ways. So, I think, we're definitely living in a time where there's great danger for our minds because of the power of the technology we wield and how we wield it against ourselves, and it's just, you could make lots of examples like social media or, but I think that, but yeah, that's kind of the essence of what Muse is all about, is trying to provide a gateway to re-find yourself through a technology, and I think, one thing that it's done for me is it's really helped me understand and recognize the value of those inner abilities that if you develop can really serve you in all dimensions of your life and can also help you have a healthier balance and use of technology in itself.
Yeah, I think what I really liked about your story was how you guys in 2010 were at the Olympics, and it was people using their brainwaves to control these giant lights there, but came with this recognition that in order to do that, you have to really tune into what's within, and then that sort of evolving into what the company is now.
Totally. Yeah. There was a certain amount of searching that we went through. When we first started getting started with this kind of technology, the immediate and obvious thing is, can I use my mind directly to control and affect the world in some way? Mm-hmm. So, that's a natural conclusion to come to. And what we did at the Vancouver Olympics is a manifestation of that. It's, you use your mind, and directly through the power of mental thought and control alone, you can affect something that everyone can see. And so we had these like huge, experiences where you could affect the lights on Niagara Falls. You could, make people's heads spin in Toronto as the CN Tower had this crazy, almost like UFO light show thing. And so if you were to focus your mind, this thing would literally start spinning, and it looked like it was going to take off, right? So you could do these massive things, and it was across the country, and it was through thought alone, right? So there's, the concept in there was really quite profound and strong. But what was so interesting about it was, you're at the Olympics, and this is overstimulation, to the max, right? People are just congregating for a celebration. Mm-hmm. And you'd sit someone down and you'd show them how to use this technology, and and you'd explain to them how, your inner states are read and then translated into some outer action. And you had all these people diving deep within themselves in the midst of all this chaos, and it was just incredible to see. We had thousands of people go through it, and everybody kind of did the same thing. They started to go deep within. You'd call it meditation. We didn't have the words for it then, to be totally honest. Meditation came later for us. But you had people having this kind of deep inner exploration and experience with themselves. And it was just because they sat down and then they had a reflection, through an interface of what was happening inside. And so I think it took us quite a while to recognize that actually that's where the gold was. but you build a technology that reads your brain states, and you immediately get attracted to the shiny things. It's like, we're going to like control this and control that, and it's going to do all these things automatically because we'll just know what we want. But then what we realize is the true value here is the mirror and the reflection it offers on your own inner world, and how that encourages you to go deeper within and understand what's happening.
Mm-hmm. So what has it been like for you to see the progression from Muse 2014 to, like, I think you had an upgrade in 2016 and then Muse 2 and now Muse S. What has that been like, just to see these products develop and become what they are today?
In some ways, we've come full circle in our product development. So when we made Muse, the reason why Muse was created, just going way back, is there wasn't a brain sensing device that one could buy that had the fidelity and performance that we needed. It was, you could go and use a research kind of laboratory system if you're, willing to spend thousands of dollars and, cover your head with gel and all these things. So, first of all, we wanted to provide an interface that was accessible and affordable. And I think we were most interested in the experiences that created, like those possibilities you could, leveraging the technology, but without a platform for it, we had to kind of go and build it ourselves. And so we actually went through a lot of design and development to try to figure out what that, simple, usable, but also high performance form factor was. And, right off the bat, we were like, well, wouldn't it be great if it could just be, this like soft and stretchy headband, you could do all these things with it. And what we quickly discovered is the wearable tech materials just simply weren't available. We just couldn't do it. You could get woven metallic textiles. So at that time, those were just sort of, coming in through manufacturing in the textile electronics industry. But you cannot read a high fidelity brain signal through them. It's impossible. And so that's our first prototypes, looked more like this, and it was using these textile materials, but you just couldn't get the performance. And so we ended up with, what people know to be Muse and the Muse form factor, because that's what we needed to do to make it work to the degree that we needed for the applications. And so, in some ways, Muse is a stopgap to what we're doing now with Muse S. But I think I'm actually very, very happy with how the whole Muse progression went, because we did solve a huge problem, and it is a device that I continue to turn to. It's comfortable. It works really, really well. It's recognizable. There's a lot of things that are beautiful and friendly and to love about it. And so yeah, I'm very happy that all that happened. And I'm also very happy that we are where we are now with something that you can really take into all corners of your life. And I think that the really revolutionary thing for us is now you can lie down with it, and that means you can start to unlock sleep and sleep states. But also, if you think about, just from a meditation perspective, the posture of meditation is really all about alertness. You sit bolt upright, and you're sending all these things to your nervous system that you're awake and aware. But, if you're trying to relax, that's the wrong posture. And you may not be trying to sleep. You might just, want to get in that 15 minutes of, uncoiling that could really help you in the middle of your day. And so having a device you can lie down with really is what's necessary, because you need to adopt the right posture. We're all interconnected. So I think, I'm truly excited to have something that can go into all these kind of different realms, because, now it's much more conducive to the human form and, how we love to use our bodies. I can go upside down with this thing on. I love that. I love being upside down personally. So.
Well, I think, people appreciate, I think that you guys had to use the materials that were available in order to get real EEG signal, something that could be validated by third parties and the scientific community to be able to use, like you've said, outside of the laboratory. This wasn't something that was a gimmick or anything. This is actually something that is getting real brainwaves that you can use for neuroscience research and then also use for neurofeedback, like you guys have used in your app. And it is so cool that you guys have been able to use material science for instance, to get a soft headband? I mean, these are electrodes within a soft headband. So that's the other thing I wanted to ask you about was, what were those material science advances that allowed you guys to go from the Muse and Muse 2 form factor to the soft band?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's trying to think of all that I can say about it, because there's certain things that that we need to protect. But there's been a lot of really interesting advances in materials that are designed to work with textiles. I think there's a recognition that that's where a lot of our wearable electronics are going. But really, it was needing to find that balance in materials that were suitable for skin biosignal measurement. And there's a certain set of requirements on that. Since that, when you read an electric signal from the skin, it's not like connecting a wire to a wire, right? So the sort of electrochemical behavior of the skin itself and how that relates to the electrode and the chemistry of the electrode is actually really important. Mm-hmm. So just sticking a piece of metal on your head doesn't work like you might expect it to. And so there's that dimension of it, but then there's also the necessity to have something that can conform to the body. Yep. And is washable and can go through manufacturing and will stand the test of time. So there was we had different pieces of the puzzle at different times, but it wasn't until, basically about a year and a half ago that we really kind of, broke the sound barrier on this one and really found ourselves in a new realm. It's just wow, this is going to work finally.
How do you keep your ears to the ground in that? Is it reading scientific papers? Is it reaching out to other research companies? How does Interaxon stay up to date on these material science advances and be able to collaborate with these other companies or other entities to make this stuff happen?
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing this for a long time now. And so, we have a lot of contacts in the industry, and we have people who do come to us, when they have something new. But it's one thing to have something that's working on the lab bench, and it's another thing to have something which is truly ready for, a low cost consumer device. Mm-hmm. And that's always a big step. So you need to be producing enough volume, and the processes have to be mature enough that you can actually do this in a low cost way. I think people really value being able to afford the device, and mm-hmm. If you look at the kind of research and medical counterparts of this technology, this stuff is really, really expensive, and it's part of the reason why is you're not getting the economy of scale in it, and you need to be able to figure out how to work with really low cost parts. In order to be able to produce something that's actually affordable. So there are so many markups, that go from the cost of the actual, the sand you're putting into it to the thing that you actually buy. And so I think most consumers would be pretty shocked at how little the device in its raw form can cost in order to be able to buy it in a store for X number of dollars. So it's, as someone who kind of tries to build consumer tech, it's just really this is how much we have to work within. Oh my God, Yeah.
No, we all appreciate it on our end, I think, or at least I hope people do appreciate that, a company such as Muse is putting together devices that can actually make that happen. Because I can only imagine the amount of work that goes into that and the commitment as well. I was trying to describe the Muse S to my mother-in-law last night. And, the best way that I could describe it is it really comes to wearable tech, right? You could almost have this within a ski cap that you put on, mm-hmm. or something like that. And it's finally here. Before it was kind of this hard casing that you wouldn't be able to do that with. So it is amazing that it's come this far. And I can only imagine what you guys will have in store for us next. Moving forward.
Yeah, one thing I'm super excited about is, we've made this so it's now modular.
Yeah.
Right. And, on one hand, you can definitely see the fashionable outlets for this, and that you can take liberties with the part that goes around your head. You can imagine different patterns and textiles, but fundamentally, so we've obviously been playing with the Muse for a long time, and you wouldn't believe how many of these things that we've ripped apart and used in various different ways, So it's beautiful to have a device where now the really complex functional piece of it is something that can move from application to application. So one thing that we're already doing here is we wear this on our head for some purposes, and sometimes you wear it around your chest. And what was used for measuring brain waves and the pressure waves of the heart and blood flow, now you have something that can measure multi-channel ECG, and you have something that can measure how you're breathing and how deeply you're breathing. So it's amazing how you can already take this thing and put it on different places of your body and measure different things. So we don't yet support those things in our consumer apps, but I mean, yeah, you can, stick it on your arm and measure electromyographic activity. You can, you can measure your cardiac rhythms. You can do all sorts of things with it. And I think, as someone who's kind of more of an inventor and a creator, the versatility of it really allows me, to start to see how we can, as a community, start to figure out new applications of the tech and what's working for people. You need to have enough of a sandbox that you can actually play in to figure out what you can build.
Yeah, you read my mind. That's what I was going to ask about, was this modular part. So was that the primary goal of creating modular, is that it would be able to apply to different form factors?
There was there were two parts to it. And one of them was, you have a fabric headband, you need to be able to wash it. Yeah. Right. And then the other dimension of it was, how then can we take this building block, this sort of like Lego piece of brain sensing, and then apply it in different ways? Mm-hmm. And so we have like a variety of different plans of where we're going to go with that. But when we actually came to how we partition these things, being able to maintain the versatility of the module was actually a pretty important piece of it.
Well, I can say from experience, the device is very, very comfortable to wear. And, if I'm doing my daily Muse meditations, Muse S is the one that I'm going to gravitate towards, just because it's so comfortable. Not to say anything bad about original Muse and Muse 2. Those are definitely wearable as well and work very well. But, congrats. The Muse S is very, very comfortable.
Awesome to hear.
So, transitioning more towards software, I know you guys are working with the new meditation company, or at least have joined forces with them, Meditation Studio. Yeah. And I've noticed a big change in the app over the last year or so. Would you be able to speak towards these guided experiences that are available now?
Totally. I think, you're noticing a couple of things. One piece of it is we've been working really hard on the technical infrastructure in the app. Mm-hmm. And so there are profound things that we can do with sound now in the app, and that took quite a while to build the bones of. We had to really when we launched the first Muse experience, this is again within the bounds of a small company. There was a certain way that we were able to generate the biofeedback experience. Mm-hmm. And we've now finally kind of upgraded the whole system. So I think, what our users are going to find is, as the year progresses, you're going to start to see a lot of the things that we've brought into these new go to sleep experiences. We're going to start to see that technology migrate into the rest of the experiences. And I'm super excited about that. Sound is, it's obvious the relationship that it has with our emotions and with the activity of our minds, both as as a neurofeedback indicator, but also as something that brings you into the experience itself. So if you look at the popularization of sound healing, for example, this discipline, this is when you kind of use tones to really help people in a therapeutic way move through difficult experiences, kind of open up through blockages, that sort of realm. It's just a direct application of the effect of sound and vibrations themselves on the human body and the mind. So, what happens when that can now be, perfectly coherent with an individual's personal set of, let's call them like inner harmonics, right? People, for instance, when you measure their brain waves, you actually notice that the different brain waves you measure are unique to the individual. Mm-hmm. You're going to have one set of frequencies. I'm going to have another set of frequencies. And, when we think about the effect of sound on the body and the mind, these things probably come into play in some, in some special way. And that's one thing that we're really trying to figure out now with our own data analysis, trying to understand, you know, now that we have a more advanced capability of creating an experience that's coherent with the vibrations that the body produces, what does that mean for its therapeutic potential? And so we've been driving this direction because we really felt there's a possibility there, but we kind of had to bring the technology up to that level first before we could really go and find out what was there. So that's a piece of it. And so that's part of what you're noticing with the development of these new experiences in the app. But the other piece of it, which is the guidance, is, really, if you think about guided meditation, what words are able to do is speak to how you're feeling. Mm-hmm. And so, if you look at how meditation practice is done, at the advanced level, there's no guidance, right? There's a set of practices, and it's all done internally. And you do work with a teacher, and the way you work with a teacher is you'll go through dialogue where they'll basically inquire about your experience and then help to point things out that you may not be seeing. But the way the practice is done is just with yourself inside without external influence. Mm-hmm. And, I think, different meditation disciplines can be, more or less sparse in their instruction. Like on one level, it's extremely sparse, right? Just sit there and focus on your breath. And that's that's it, right? So where guidance comes into play is, in that beginner's journey from, not knowing anything about this whatsoever and not having any mental training in this way whatsoever, you have to get yourself to a place where you can start to apply some of these more advanced techniques in an unguided fashion. And so, some people find that, their attention is settled enough already that they can directly engage with some of these practices, and it's actually a very effective gateway. But there are many, many other people for whom having guidance as you're getting to that point where you sort of understand for yourself what you need to do, but also, aren't so much caught in the chaos of the mind and like the emotional flow within you that you can actually engage with it. And so if you're in the middle of an intense emotional reaction of some kind, then the best thing you can do is, have someone try to address that emotion directly. And because that's how you need to work with it. And so when you think about guided meditation, this is exactly what you can do, is you can actually, you can have a teacher, that speaks in the right way for you. Mm-hmm. And then the content of what they say can address how you're feeling in that moment. And so I think, the reason why we joined forces with Meditation Studio is because, well, firstly, they have an incredible ability to produce quality meditation content. And they've been really, really good at developing a community of teachers that can address, from many different perspectives and kinds of practice, but in a way where they all harmonize with one another. There's not a tension between one kind of style and another. There's a real openness. And so what we understood we had to do in order to start to branch out and have, this dimension of bringing people into the practice is we had to have the diversity. And, the match was very clear for us that, you can't just put some guided meditations in your app and really have it, be what it needs to be, because you need to speak to enough different people and experiences. So you really have to start with a lot. Mm-hmm. And so, it was very clear that by coming together, we could really immediately offer people a huge library of quality practices. So it then can be, that kind of experience where you can say, okay, here's how I'm feeling right now, or here's what I feel that I need. There is something here for me. Yeah. And so, I think in the way you use it, that's a great framing for it. It's like, what do you need right now? Mm-hmm. And so it was really, really important to us that we could actually very quickly sort of build out, that dimension of it and offer the diversity that was required for it to be a powerful tool in that aspect. So,
instead of just training the attention with the neurofeedback, now people have a lot of options to choose to explore meditative practice. And before we wrap up here today, I did want to get more towards the data science as well, because I know you have a computer science background. Muse is collecting more EEG data than has ever been collected before, basically at this point, right? Mm-hmm. So I know there's a lot of excitement about that. What can you tell us about data science with the Muse and what that means for the company moving forward?
Well, so I think one thing that's pretty awesome is we've been able to get a view of a huge number of people in meditation practice. So when we began, we really focused on experts and people who were in that learning journey to try to understand what they were going through. But I think what's amazing now is we actually have such a wide range of data points for people who are going through this process. And I think that's really, really important because we are so individual. And, I think, Muse has been able to, develop a really effective kind of feedback and learning tool, let's say. But, when we developed it, we had to work within the limitations of the data we had access to. And there are nuances in the practice and in an individual's biosignals that need to be respected in order to sort of have things that go deeper or to fit specific applications. And so I think what's really exciting for us is now we kind of have, enough there that we can start to really build that kind of individualized experience where we can start to go into deeper practices, or we can start to work on, the threshold between wake and sleep, these hypnagogic states. The states of deep meditation are also very similar to those. And you'll go from, let's say, if I were to bring in, let's say, more classical brainwave lingo, you'd go from an alpha state into a theta state. And it's quite, your brainwaves become more orderly and they kind of slow down. And, in some senses, that continues all the way down into deep sleep, where in deep sleep you have a predominant, this delta activity where you have very, very slow vibrations in the brain.
So would there be different options that you can choose to get you further into a meditative state basically on where you are?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And to be honest, we really haven't decided the right way to bring it out yet. Yeah. I mean, one possibility is having a more advanced mode. So, once you sort of like get into the gate and you have a solid practice and you're starting to notice the limitations in the experience, now there's somewhere for you to go, right? Because now, perhaps you can in some way, choose your own adventure and to say, hey, I want to have feedback on this particular thing, or I want to pay particular attention to this kind of metric because I see that it's relating back to my practice in a useful way. And useful is actually, a combination of both what you yourself find to be interesting and correlated with where you're trying to go to, but also in relation to other people who might be at a similar stage of practice and being able to learn from them and what they're doing.
And I imagine that has something to do with the calibration at where you're starting at. You would pick a option and then you have to calibrate, and then it would lead you down a certain path. Is that?
Yeah. So that's one possibility. And the other one is, over the course of your use, you build up basically a landscape of neural activity, and you have an opportunity to choose what territory you want to inhabit and where you're trying to go.
Right.
So one thing we have been able to do is actually to build really amazing maps for an individual's neural activity, and trying to figure out how to bring that into a product experience in a way that doesn't overwhelm people and actually empowers them. So there's always that tension. On one hand you have simplicity and usability,
right,
and yet on the other hand you have like functionality and like power, right? So
right.
How do you balance those things?
Yeah, to get it right out of the box, it's almost intimidating to begin with for a beginner, and then just to be like, oh, you can, induce this state within yourself and then pick this option. People would probably just not even know where to start with that, I imagine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's been some really interesting insights. I know I've heard from just population EEG data as well. Any new scientific discoveries or papers coming out soon that you could talk about?
Well, it's, if you're interested in the research, I mean, you can just search for it on the internet. And there's some really, really cool stuff out there. Some of the coolest stuff I've seen recently was done by folks at MIT. and they are using Muse to measure people while they're in different stages of sleep, and they end up stimulating them while they're in dream states. And they're finding that they can influence people's dreams in really interesting ways. Right? So I think that's like super cool and fascinating. Don't know like how that manifests yet to like a product experience and a very clear use case. But it's like, it's so interesting that we can start to access states that we really have a loose connection to, just because it's, we're asleep or, are on the edge. Right. So I find that stuff personally really fascinating. But in the kind of like broad population, the kind of, big data side of things, I mean, something that I always have found really fascinating and we can see super clearly in the Muse data is how the brain changes as it ages. Yeah, there's a number of different ways, but one of the ways which is super clear is how your alpha waves change in amplitude and frequency as you age. So you can ask a question of like, what's your brain age right now? And are there things that you can do to have an effect on this trajectory? And I can't say like good or bad or what it means from a brain functionality perspective, but it is something which is like very, very like validated statistical correlation with the aging brain. And so something that we've done in the last years, we've actually did a study with over 1 million meditation sessions, which is exciting because it's amazing to add another zero to the scale of your experiments. And we haven't published the results of that yet, but I mean, it is very interesting to have some new tools of how we can map out, the space of neural activity that humans experience and what that might mean to understanding an individual contextually against everything else. I'm looking forward to sharing that stuff. I was hoping it was going to be out by now, but it's build tech, publish papers. Yeah. So, right now we've been building tech.
Well, that's where you guys just need more manpower, right? Divide and conquer. Well, I really appreciate you talking to me today. And to wrap things up, I wanted to ask you what it's like to go from, having a art project where you're controlling lights at the Olympics to seeing this proliferation of scientific research and apps and wearables. What is that like to see that journey over the last decade for you?
It's pretty trippy, to be totally honest. I think what I can say is, when I think about what's to come, my view of what's possible and how we should go through it has changed. And I think when I began this journey, it was really all about, well, what can we build, using the nuts and bolts that we have access to. And I think what's happened is the we has changed, I really now feel very strongly that when we're looking at, the grand problem of mental well-being, and how to live a happy life. I mean, I think it's really a we problem. And I think, the thing that I'm excited to is to try to provide, more tools as we're able to really empower the community to, go on a similar journey to what we have gone on through the development of Muse and to offer now their own insights in what's working for them. And I think that this is something where we really need, all of our unique ideas and experiences to be rolled in to figure out what's working, because it's, we are talking about the needle in the haystack, right? I mean, this is a new realm of how we work with ourselves and how we use tech to empower that, I'd be crazy to think that we had a better answer than somebody else. I actually think that there are many relevant answers and so I'd love to see that come together.
Well, I think you guys have shown incredible leadership in showing everybody what can be done. And I can tell you from a perspective of talking to different people on YouTube and having this channel that it's really inspired a lot of people. So I want to thank you personally.
Thanks a lot, Cody. It's always amazing to hear that. Keeps us going.
Well, I can't wait to see what you guys come up with next. And Chris, I really appreciate the talk today.
Likewise.